In today's episode of the Let's Talk Psychology podcast, we're exploring why many gifted children grow up feeling lonely and struggle in adulthood. This audio includes subtitles so you can follow along more clearly and absorb each idea at your own pace. Why do so many bright kids end up feeling stuck, misunderstood, and deeply alone later in life? They were expected to be ahead, praised constantly, told they had huge potential. Yet, somewhere along the way, that promise turned into pressure. The compliments slowly became a cage, and now many of those same kids, once celebrated and confident, are struggling as adults. They can't find motivation. They feel socially behind. They have trouble starting tasks, finishing goals, or connecting with people. And the hardest part is they don't even know why. On the outside, everything appears normal. They still seem sharp and capable. But inside, there's a steady feeling of being disconnected, as if life is happening around them, and they're simply observing rather than participating. There's a reason behind this. Gifted children often build their identity around being smart, and when intelligence becomes their primary identity, the same thing that made them feel special as kids becomes the thing that limits them later. So let's discuss why this happens, and, more importantly, how to break the pattern. Because this isn't about failure. It's about a survival strategy that once helped them, but no longer serves them. And once you understand how you got here, you can begin to move forward. When we're young, identity is simple. Kids attach to one or two traits and build who they are around those ideas. A child may think of themselves as the kid who loves Pokemon, or the one who only eats chicken nuggets. It's uncomplicated, and that's normal. Identity at that age is based on interests or labels. One of the strongest labels a child can receive is, "You're smart." That phrase stays with them. It gets repeated by teachers, parents, and classmates. It becomes a core piece of how they see themselves. And for a while, it feels great. Being smart as a child brings attention, approval, and a sense of ease. You don't need to study as much, you learn quickly, and you stand out. But here's the hidden cost. When children are praised for being smart, they're usually being praised for effortless ability, not hard work. You were applauded when you solved problems quickly, when you got high grades without trying, when you understood things on the first attempt, and gradually you develop a subtle but dangerous belief. If I'm really smart, things should be easy for me. That belief quietly begins to undermine you later in life. Because the moment something becomes difficult, when you struggle, fail, or don't understand something right away, it doesn't feel like a normal challenge. It feels like a threat to your identity. Because deep down, you tell yourself, you start thinking, if I'm supposed to be smart, then why is this difficult? And instead of facing challenges, you begin avoiding them. You don't volunteer an answer unless you're completely sure. You skip activities unless you know you'll succeed. You avoid new interests because you worry they might show you're not as intelligent as others believed. Gradually, your world gets smaller. You only do what you already excel at. You stay in familiar situations. You protect the identity of the smart kid, rather than trying new things. And that's the trap. While others are learning through trial, error, and growth, you stay inside a shrinking comfort zone. The longer you remain in it, the harder it becomes to step out. Eventually, you realize your identity feels fragile, like failure would break it. You don't want to look uninformed or incapable, so you pause your progress, and that's when isolation appears. Because when growth stops, connection often stops too. Relationships come from shared experiences. Being on teams, struggling through awkward phases together, working toward goals. When you avoid those moments, you miss the opportunities that create real bonds. You don't join the club because you fear not being good. You skip the sport because it's unfamiliar. You avoid group work because it feels frustrating. Without knowing it, you remove yourself from the natural flow of social life. Yet you still want connection, so you fall back on the one thing you trust, your intelligence. Instead of emotionally connecting, you observe, you analyze, you mentally map people. This creates cognitive empathy. You understand emotions intellectually, but you don't truly feel them with others. It works for a while. You can hold conversations, seem confident, maybe even appear charming. But inside, it's tiring, because you're thinking constantly. Not simply being present, but planning, predicting, and assessing. Socializing becomes another thing you must excel at, and to avoid doing it wrong, you start avoiding it altogether. That deepens the loneliness, and since you're smart, you think you should solve this too. So you turn to logic. You try to repair self-worth with reasoning. You create explanations to convince yourself you're fine. You overanalyze your behavior. But intelligence doesn't solve emotional pain. Logic deals with external problems, not inner wounds. So your mind loops endlessly because there is no rational answer to the question, am I enough? That answer must come emotionally, and emotional development is often the piece gifted kids miss. When the loneliness becomes heavy, the mind forms a defense. You start believing, I'm just different. I don't connect because others don't think deeply enough. Instead of acknowledging loneliness, you tell yourself you're above superficial interaction. Not because you truly believe it, but because that feels safer than admitting you want connection. This is known as defensive arrogance, and it becomes one of the most isolating patterns. You can fall into this cycle without noticing. It forms a barrier between you and others. And even when you want closeness, the wall blocks you, because connection needs humility, presence, and the willingness to be seen and vulnerable. So, how do you change this? The first step, and it's essential, is to stop defining yourself as the smart kid. You must release that identity, not because intelligence is negative, but because anchoring your self-worth to it becomes harmful. When your value depends on effortless success, you will avoid effort, avoid failure, and avoid anything that might challenge the idea that you are exceptional. You will limit your growth just to protect the image, and eventually, that image breaks anyway. So the solution is to build a new identity. Not around being smart, but around being willing to grow. You shift from asking, how can I look intelligent? To, what will help me move forward? You stop protecting your ego and start accepting discomfort. You let yourself try things and not be great at them. You participate without needing to outperform. Yes, it may feel awkward and uncomfortable. It may feel like a step backward. But in reality, it's the first step toward real development. The old identity said your worth came from being special. The new one reminds you that your worth comes from being human. And being human means you can be unsure. You can grow slowly. You can feel lost. You cannot have everything figured out. The key is to take action anyway. Not perfect action, not clever action, but honest, imperfect, human steps forward. So if you feel stuck, numb, or distant, if you've spent your life trying to be the smartest person in the room and now don't know who you are without that role, this is where change begins. You let go of the story. You stop trying to impress. You start trying to be genuine. You don't need to be the smartest person in the room to belong there. You just need to show up, even when it's uncomfortable, even when you feel unsure, even when it's unfamiliar. And if you do that, if you stop holding on to the part of you that needs to be above everything, you'll begin to feel something you may not have felt in a long time. Connection. Not because you proved yourself, not because you earned it, but because you finally stepped down from the pedestal and joined the world the rest of us live in. And it turns out, that world isn't so bad. In fact, it's the only place you can truly be seen. And more importantly, it's the only place you can genuinely feel at home. So if any part of this spoke to you, if you recognize these patterns or something clicked that you couldn't explain before, share it in the comments and tell me what stood out. You're not alone, and identifying the pattern is often the first meaningful step toward changing it. Thanks for listening to the Let's Talk Psychology podcast. Take care of your mind, And I'll see you in the next episode.